Today's topic will be exception handling. So before starting exception handling, what is error and what is exception? That we need to see. So if you consider error, you have syntax error. What is syntax error? If I miss a semicolon, if I miss a particular flower brackets, parenthesis, then we use the syntax error. We get a syntax error. So what is logical error? If A greater than B, and I'm just saying system.out.println, B is max. So this is logical error, you can say. And there is a runtime error. See, these are all different, what I'm explaining. Runtime error are due to lack of resources. An exception is not an error. Remember it. Exception is different. So runtime error is due to lack of resources means what? Stack overflow error, virtual memory error. So in that system, if the memories are not there, then we get it. So let's take an exception example and see what exception exactly do. So I have a particular class. Suppose I want to find division. Let's write some instructions. So if I run this program, what is the output we are getting? 1 to 5, all the instructions are getting executed. But if I give 0, 10 divided by 0, statement 1 will get executed, 10 divided by 0. What is 10 divided by 0? Even where what we get when we divide a number by 0?
You get an exception.
We
0
get
is an exception.
infinity. 10 divided by 0, we get an infinity. Then what happens? JVM, while executing the program, it doesn't understand that infinity. So JVM will create an exception object and throw it. That is what happening. It will terminate the program. Exception object and throw it before termination, you can say. And before termination, what it's doing? It will create an object and throw it. So what's happening here? At this moment, JVM will create a exception object throw new. What is that exception? Arithmetic exception. Arithmetic exception. So some message should be displayed, right? Divide by 0. So JVM will throw this object. And if you run this thing now, what happens? You'll get 1 in that exception. And why I'm getting this java.lang.arithmetic exception divide by 0 and all? Because JVM is creating the object and throwing it. So whenever JVM doesn't understand any instruction, it will terminate the program. And that is the result of exception. If an exception occurs, then JVM will terminate the program. To avoid that termination, we are using this exception handling. So this exception handling doesn't mean that you will repair that instruction and change the value. We can't do that. Once the assigned value cannot be modified, the only thing we can do is at least the remaining instructions are looking good. So this remaining instructions should get executed. For that, we use exception handling. What is exception? In a program execution, if an abnormal situation occurs, then JVM will terminate the program. And what is the exception handling? To avoid the termination, we use exception handling. How we can do that? We use try block for the risky code and catch block for the exception class object and the message. Whatever the exception message is there, that will be coming. Understood? Any doubts in this thing? So how we can write this try catch? Where is the risky code? There only we write it. So let's assume that second line is the risky code, and then what I'll do, let's include the third line also. Catch block. What is the exception class? Arithmetic exception. Now let's don't what is that name?
Put C at the arithmetic. C at the last of the word arithmetic.
Yeah,
Before E.
C. Yeah, I mean that C. Because java.lang is a package, so by default it will be available. You don't have to import. So I won't print any message now. Just execute this. Why the third instruction is not executing? Because when the JVM creates an object and throw it, from this line, it will directly go to the catch block. And in this catch block, you can see arithmetic exception will catch that object. Means internally what is happening? This arithmetic exception reference will catch that arithmetic exception object. So this is happening at this line. Catching in the sense, this object will be catched by this class reference. Okay, so what happens if you write n number of instructions here? So it won't have anything else. Just you can see only that 1, 4, 5, 6. What about all these instructions? It won't execute. Why? The reason is when that exception occurs from the try block, it will directly transfer the object to the catch block. So in between any instruction is there, it won't execute. That's the reason I said try risky code in that means only where you think that risky code is there, we write the try block. Now, how to print a message that 2 and 3 are not executing because of an exception? We have a method known as print stack trace. What happens? This method will print that message. Arithmetic exception divide by 0 at this line number. So this is done by print stack trace. If I want only message, what I can do? A dot get message. What is the return type? String. So we need to write this inside the system.out.println because the return type is there. So I'm just getting this divide by 0. Okay. Just give me a minute. Yeah, sorry for that. So the message get message will print that message itself. Okay. But if I want to know the line number and the class name, then we use print stack trace. Mainly use this print stack trace itself. It's better. Now, so what is the category? Like exception, what's the superclass? What are the subclasses we have? If you see exception in Java, if you go to that images, you have lot of classes, right? So in this, if you just check it out, let's say if I click on this, so throwable is the superclass. In that, exception and error are there. Error, we can't do anything because that is not in our hand, that runtime error, like virtual machine error, stack overflow error, out of memory error. So these things we can't do anything. Throwable contains exception, and exception has runtime exception, and these are checked exceptions. You can say unchecked exception and checked exception. So that exception is classified into two things. You can see that red ones are the checked exceptions or the compile time exception. And these left side are the unchecked exceptions and runtime exceptions because these occur at runtime itself. And this, if I use, will know at compile time itself whether the exception is occurring or not. Okay. So throwable is a superclass of all the exceptions. And exception is classified into two types. What are those? Checked exception unchecked exception. So what is checked exception? You can say here the checked exception means, let's say, the exceptions which are known to the compiler. And what are unchecked exceptions? The exceptions which are not known compiler. How does the compiler knows that the method will give an exception? If you open a command prompt, let's say uh, Java p space java dot SQL. See, you can see in here we have this SQL exception, right? So what is that? You can say have some connection class inside that package. I'm just showing you the methods. How that compiler knows that this method will generate an exception or I'll get an exception here. So if you see these methods, there is a throws keyword and there is a java.sql exception. So if I use this method, then there will be an SQL exception generated. So whenever I use these methods, there might be a SQL exception. Then these are already known to the compiler because developer is defining the exceptions, right? So these are known as checked exceptions. What are those? IO exception, SQL exception, and here file or input output exception, file not found exception, class not found exception. Those are all checked exceptions. And these runtime exceptions are nothing but which we don't know at that runtime itself. I know based on the value. If I give 2, I won't get any exception. But if I give 0, I get an exception. It's purely at runtime based on the value we are getting the exception. Understood till now? Any doubts in this thing, anyone?
Understood.
So what is an exception? We understand here based on the concept here. What is exception? Anyone?
If there's an abnormal situation, then in the program execution,
Then
that is
will
JVM will terminate the program, and
yes,
that is the
JVM will
exception.
terminate the program. So if an abnormal situation occurs or if a instruction that JVM doesn't understand, then abnormal execution occurs. Or you can say like termination happens. So try catch we use. Checked exception, unchecked exception we have. Next. So suppose if there are two particular scenarios, let's say I'm creating a string, some name, or is that Java, and I want to find that length. How to find the length of a particular variable? We have a method like name dot length. If I give 2 here, so what happens? Everything is correct. That 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is getting executed. Okay. Now the thing is, let's say I have null here. What do you mean by null? There is no value. It will get a null pointer exception here. Now, can anyone explain what are the instructions displayed? If I run this thing, what statements will be displayed on that?
Just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Just
Oh,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What about 6? Any other answers, anyone? Because just now I
I
explained
think
clearly everything. I think, you think?
1, 2, 4, 5, 6. 3, I'm not sure.
Okay, others try to.
I don't think 3 would print either.
Okay. So what we understand here, statement 1 is getting executed. Statement 2 division 10 by 2, it's 5, it's fine. Now here name.length is null. So I'll get a null pointer exception, right? JVM is creating what? Throw new null pointer exception. Now tell me what will be the output. What instructions, based on this, what instructions will be displayed?
Will it print a null pointer exception there for statement 3?
Okay, null pointer exception at statement. So what are the instructions? Just tell me the numbers from there, like. Give me the numbers. 1, 2, 3 only or anything else? Or only 1, 2 or 1 or what?
1, 2, 4, 5, 6. And for 3, I think it should print the exception,
How
the message
exception,
there.
how the message will print?
No,
You need to understand that how the message
only
will be
the
printed.
statement 1 and 2 will be executed because the kind of
Yes.
exception that we put here is null pointer exception, which is not an arithmetic exception. We should either put null pointer exception in the in a new catch block, or else we need to put catch of exception space some
Yes.
reference variable name.
So the thing is, you need to understand that null pointer exception cannot be stored inside this arithmetic exception because these two are not related, right? A class object cannot be stored in another class until unless if there is inheritance relationship, upcasting. Okay. So what happens? 1, 2 will be getting executed and the next thing will be the exception. Why? Because here you cannot say null pointer exception, right? Because that is two different things. So what we need to do, we need to write another catch block. Try with multiple catch block will be the print stack trace. So what happens now? 1, 2, 4, 5, 6 with the message. Understood? Any doubts? So try with multiple catch block is the better option compared with try single try catch. That you need to see. And next thing, I have inheritance, like exception is a superclass and runtime exception is a subclass, and in the runtime exception we have all the subclasses. If you don't know the exception name and all, what I can use this upcasting concept, and here instead of giving null pointer exception, I can just give exception. Superclass reference can store all the subclass objects. That is the advantage we have. So if I run this thing, I'll get the same output. So I'm getting the same output. Even though if I have only one particular catch block also, it's fine. But most probably we don't use this exception like superclass thing. We give the exception class name itself. Okay. So next, this is try with multiple catch blocks. Now the next concept is final keyword. So sorry, finally block. Already we have seen final keyword, but now we have to see finally block. So what is finally block? If you see in between try catch, if I write an instruction, it will give error because we cannot have try and an instruction then the catch block. It's mandatory that try catch are written simultaneously. Sorry. Now we also can write finally block. So what this finally block is doing? Finally is a block which gets executed irrespective of exception. So if we go to JDBC or Hibernate, we open some objects. Like connection object is there, we connected to the database and the connection object is in open state. Now, at the end of the program, we need to close that object every time. So if that object is not closed, what happens? The connection will be established as it is. Okay. So to avoid that problem, we are using this finally block to close that connections. Because if a abnormal situation occurs, JVM will directly terminate before deallocating the memory or before clearing the memory, it will directly terminate the program. That's the problem. So to avoid that problem, we use finally block. So as I cannot show you how that connection is closed in this program, I'll just write an instruction system.out.println. What is that? Finally block. And what is this finally block? Irrespective of gets executed. That is the main thing. Understood? Any doubts in this thing? So let's run this part now. And you can see if I give null pointer exception before executing, it should print it. So before exception, the final block is getting executed. Now, if I have this exception, like which can catch that thing, if I run it now, after the exception, the final block is getting executed. Means the message after the catch block, finally block is getting executed. So irrespective of exception, the finally block gets executed. Let's say if I'm just giving a name, so there is no exception, right? Still the final block is getting executed. In all the scenarios, the finally block execution is a mandatory thing. Because It's get executed irrespective of the exception. Understood? Any doubts in this thing? Respond if it's clear or not. Respond, guys. Is it clear or not? Just tell me yes or no.
Yes.
Now, after finally block, we have two more things. Like in this try, catch, finally, we use throw and throws. You know why we use throws? Because throws is used to handle the checked exception. The checked exceptions are handled using throws because whenever a method is used, we use throws keyword in the method. Or whatever the program we are writing, we use throws keyword. Then why throw? You know why throw is used? Because JVM will use this throw keyword to generate the exception object and throw it. So what is the difference here? It is used to generate the exception object and throw it. And it is used to handle the checked exceptions. So checked exceptions can be handled in two ways, either try catch or that particular throws keyword. Anything is fine. Now, let's write a program for throwing a exception, our user defined exception, you can say. Let's consider I'm writing a voting application. So age is somewhat 19. If age greater than or equals to 18, what is that meaning? Eligible for voting. Else system.out.println not eligible but if I want to terminate the program instead of displaying not eligible for voting, I can use throw new exception class and the message. So whenever we are using throw keyword, it is unhandled. So what we need to use? We need to use try catch. Sorry, throws exception. So JVM knows whether if I use throw keyword and generate, then it should be handled using throws. If I run this thing, there is no problem. But if I use 17, then there is an abnormal termination. Understood what is throw and throws? Throws is used to generate that exception and throws is nothing but if I use any predefined methods which has this exception, then we can use this throws keyword. And if you see, object is there. What is object? Object is a superclass classes. In Java, the first class they wrote is object. From object only the other classes has been defined. So all the particular classes are the subclasses of object itself. And all the object methods are available to any class. Understood? Any doubts in this thing? Try, catch, finally, throw and throws. This entire concept is known as exception handling. So why we use this try catch? Why we use exception handling? Anyone? Anyone?
When JVM throws the exception to catch the exception, we use exception handling.
What is the advantage by doing that?
Does it prevent the termination of the program?
Yes, abnormal termination is avoided using that. So what is checked exception and unchecked exception?
When the compiler knows the exception, just check the exception.
Yes, and what is unchecked?
The compiler will not be aware of that kind of exception and will just throw an error or terminate the program.
Yes. So what is throw and throws?
There are two keywords used in exception handling. Throw simply say that this class may throw a particular kind of exception. We do it when we are declaring the class. The throw keyword, we use it to throw the actual exception.
Yeah. So that's the exception handling, and this concept is important. Exception handling, collection, multi-threading. Okay. So after that, arrays and strings, these concepts will be left out. And once we are done, we'll start this SQL and JDBC. Okay.
Okay.
So that's it for today. We'll meet tomorrow. Sorry, on
Thank you.
Monday we'll meet.